My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasangran, Guru Piran Neo, fellow Jnanis. Uh, I'm going to continue with the science of meditation, particularly later on I'll touch on the Kundalini meditation. And the last few parts, from part 1 to part 8, we've been covering part of the what happens to our brain when we practice meditation, right? And there is ample evidence that show that when we practice meditation, there is a structural change that takes place in our brain, and the brain is the hardware for the mind, and the brain is the hardware, the mind is the software, and with the mind comes the intellect, right? So when one practices meditation, you see that maybe in the early stages you may not see the changes, but slowly over time, you experience micro level changes that slowly starts having a physiological impact on the brain. And that has an impact on the flow of the electromagnetic field in the brain. And you'll see that that has an impact on the functioning of the brain. Different parts of the brain has different functions, which I covered in my previous satsangs from 1 to 8. I won't go into detail, but clearly we have seen that when we practice meditation, there are 10 parts to the brain, which I covered earlier, covers from the neurotransmitters and, the gray matter and the white matter. Somewhat like meditation is like the exercise for the brain. That's how we exercise for the body to keep the muscle toned. Meditation keeps the brain toned. And this is very important because as we age, parts of our brain slowly starts, the functioning of parts of our brain starts slowly diminishing. And this is part of the aging process. Plus also when that happens, there are hormonal changes that takes place. As we know that there are parts of our brains that controls our endocrinal system, that controls all our hormones. And this has an impact on the growth of our cells in the body, growth of the neurotransmitters in our brain, the gray matter. So as we age, we see that this has a physiological impact on the brain and the body. So one way to keep it toned is actually through meditation. And we see that as we practice meditation, we stimulate part of the brains, and from the neurotransmitters to the gray matter and so on. Today I want to capture the last aspect of the brain, which is really important, which is, although I touched a little bit on the part 8, which is actually with respect to the part of the brain that connects the brain to the spinal cord, which is actually, if you see very carefully, this is the part of the brain that actually the stem that we have. If I can pull this down, we see that the brain stem, which actually connects the brain to the spinal cord, and this has got major functions in terms of breathing, the flow of the neurotransmitters throughout the spinal cord, and it has an impact on our breathing, it has an impact on our heart system, and so on. And you'll see that as we go a little bit more detail, you see that why is it that when we practice meditation, our breathing changes, our heart rate changes, and why is it that we feel a little bit more relaxed when we practice meditation? We become more calmer and cooler. So there must be a physiological impact that meditation is having on us. So every time, whenever we practice meditation, or if you read in the scriptures or in many books, it shows that when you practice meditation, we feel calmer, we feel cooler, we are less stressed. Our heartbeats become more and more, optimal. Our breathing slows down. All this we have heard, but why is that the case? So we really need to understand the physiological changes that this meditation is having. Yes, we experience all this, but I think we need to know why this is happening. And this is what, you know, my exploration has been over the many years. That yes, when I am at the workplace or when I'm in various places, there are moments that, you feel in the early days anxiety, adrenaline is pumping, particularly in certain situations. But when you start practicing meditation, suddenly you see that you become more calmer, more collected, more, your thoughts become more clearer. And there was a big difference you can see. And I experienced that and always ran in my mind that is it a placebo effect or is it a real effect? And this is not happening once or twice, but it is happening continuously whenever there are very challenging moments. There are moments that you get overly excited or there's tension or stress. Just a few minutes of practicing meditation, suddenly everything calms down, your breathing calms down, you know, your heartbeat, before was just palpitation is very high. Now everything becomes more and more calm. So I realized that something that meditation was doing that is having an impact on my breathing, on my heart rate, and all that has given a much more calmer and a cooler sense of being, and that helped in terms of finding solutions to the challenges and addressing some of the issues of anxiety and so on. So as I was exploring this, I realized that there was something physiologically taking place, especially when I was practicing meditation. And this is what the exploration that led me to. So we see that the brain stem, which is essentially that which connects our breathing and our heart rate and our digestive system, right? So they are all interconnected. So and this is linked through the various network of neurons that are passing through from the brain right up to our spinal cord. And later on, you'll see that when I explain the Mahan's meditation method, you'll see how directly that meditation has an impact on these parts of the brain that has an, that directly influences our state of our health of our brain, state of our mind, and also our intellect. So one needs to understand the science behind this to really say, wow, this is something that is happening. So I because you know it, you intensify your meditation, particularly as you're aging. Like if you are, maybe in the 40s and 50s, if you intensify your meditation, you see that as you hit 50s and 60s, your brain will still be chugging away. But nevertheless, even though you may be in your 50s, 60s, 70s, if you continue to practice this, you'll see that parts of your brain that is, you know, before shutting down will start regenerating. This is, we call it the neurogenesis, So I want to talk a little bit more what happens, particularly in this brain stem, which is much more complex structures that are there. So let me take you through this. Uh, so there is a part of your brain that is essentially somewhere in the middle there, and I just highlighted there. This part is very, very interesting. And it links the brain to the spinal cord. And this part has a set of relays, like a control system that controls the information between the cerebrum and cerebellum. And I explain what the function of these cerebrum and cerebellum earlier, both the left, right hemisphere, what are their functions, the flow of information. So there is a flow of information, flow of electrical pulse from the spinal cord to the brain and vice versa, because the spinal cord is a very important structure that sends and receives signals from all the other organs, from the sensory to the heart to the lungs and so on. So there is a very important circuit system there. And this part, which is called the pons, which actually right in the center, and this is why sometimes when you're practicing meditation, you feel a slight pressure in the early days. And basically that part of the brain is being stimulated. It's a set of muscles that actually are very, what we call switch points. It is, transmitting information from the spinal cord to the brain. It also manages a lot of the unconscious process, things that we are not, we don't control, but it happens automatically, such as breathing. Although the basic breathing takes place naturally, but one can manage the breathing through our own control systems. The other one is sleep-wake cycles, and if people have difficulty, why many people as they age, the sleep patterns gets disrupted because part of the flow of that information in that region is not relayed properly. And so there are hormonal impacts that there are hormones that put you to sleep, and there are hormones that keeps you awake, gives you agitation, all those things. So when this part of the body is not functioning or the brain is not functioning, you see that it can impact your sleep patterns. So there are several junctures. So I've put that structure. It's like junction points, right? If any of the transportation system, there are junctions that send signals. There are kind of stations that everything comes together and then it's channeled. And this is one of those junction points. It controls a number of muscles and which carries information, and there's a lot of nerves that takes this information to the head, the face, and so on. Right? So now, if because of aging or if there is an accident, and this is something very important, that aging, this part of the brain starts declining, or the nerves start dying off, or the nerves start or when there is an accident, particularly people in the motorcycle, when they get into an accident, there's a whiplash. Parts of that brain, that parts of that part of the brain is damaged, and it can have an impact on one's, the flow of information. So you see that, sometimes people get stroke, blockage, or nerves give way, or, so it impacts, balance, get double vision. Swallowing becomes very difficult because swallowing is also a process that requires various signals. When the signals are not coming through, you see that swallowing becomes very difficult. You get numbness, loss of coordination. And this is something very important because as we get older, this part of the switch points don't work really well. And that's why you see as people age, their coordination is out. Their walking and all these things become more challenging. They're more careful. The other aspect is also that, remember, this is a relay point that takes information from various sensors, sensory organs, and the various, parts of your body. So articulating words can be very difficult because the sound, the understanding, the clarity is not there. So you see, as people age, they find it hard to communicate and so on. So, and the other aspect which I hear often among many people is vertigo, because the information is this not sent optimally, or there's some short circuiting. The coordination, the brain's GPS system becomes all screwed up. So, they get spinning, headache. So this is quite common among many people as they age, the vertigo feeling, they feel, as though dizzy. So these are some of the key features of this part of the organ. It's a very important part, which is the interface between the spinal cord and the brain. And the spinal cord, as I said, carries a lot of information and receives information to the brain. So that flow, somewhat like a junction point between multiple stations. If that junction is not working well, you get a lot of traffic jam, and you get backing up of information, and you run into various difficulties. Why is meditation really important is that that part of the brain, which is the junction point, has a lot of nerves and muscles. And as we practice meditation, later on I'll show you when I cover Mahan's meditation method, he raises the energy through these channels. And as one practices meditation, the electrical pulse or the neurotransmitters that are sending signals goes through regularly and strengthens those nerves. And the junctions, or what we call the pawns, become more and more efficient, more and more. So when there is flow of the, you can call it Kundalini energy or the energy or the neurotransmitters in a more scientific way, you see that that part of the brain is exercised to some extent. Somewhat like an exercise. When you exercise, things are working, the muscles are moving, and you see that that part of the brain is stimulated. And as long as the muscles are continuously functioning, you see that the rate of, this nerve decline or death or dying off is much more slower. Than it slows down that process. And that is why you see that those who practice meditation, for a very, very long time, even when they are at a very, late stage of their lives in the 70s and 80s, you see they are very, very alert. Their walking is steady, their thought processes are steady, and their speech is not slurred, or so it's, and the sleep pattern, all these have an impact because this is a very important junction that relays that information. As I was doing my own research, I found this one article by Shao and et al. That shows actually that, the findings of the study shows the clinical implications that meditation actually treats what they call affective symptoms as people age. So one of the things that affective disorder that comes because of an aging, when someone is aging, is that when that part of the brain is not working very well, the information is not relayed. There are hormonal changes. You see that people tend to be, as they age, they become more depressed. So there's a lot of emotional impact. There are bipolar, they get because information is not coming through efficiently. The personality changes. Many of them have a sense of sadness as though they've lost something, and they've lost appetite for doing anything. The motivation levels are down. The appetite to the sleep patterns change completely. That further works things, makes things more difficult. And one of the things they see is that the loss of energy. Not surprising because the flow of information is not so great, right? So again, difficulty in concentrating, and more importantly is that they have difficulty making decisions. Now, I've seen this among aging people, right? I've had many disciples that come for meditation. The younger generation tend to get it faster than the older generation. But the younger generation have a different problem. The problem is that they get distracted very quickly by the material world and other things. So the sense of discipline is not there. But among the older people who are in the later part when they start meditating, we realize that actually they have difficulty concentrating because parts of the brain is not relaying through that, the energy flow more efficiently than a much more younger person. So there's two aspects I see among people. The younger generation having, more challenges in concentrating because they're distracted by many things. It's also got to do with hormones, right? The hormones are firing away. And so the younger generation from 18 to 25 have a particular type of challenge. But the older generation also have concentration problems because, again, this part of the brain is not efficient because the nerve cells are not strong enough, So we see that, many of them, the flow of information is much more less efficient. So how do we overcome this issue? And this is where there are a few things that one can do to overcome these challenges. Number one is that you must allocate a particular time for meditation, right? And you cannot do it randomly, right? You have to be consistent. That's number one. Number two is that there are set of exercises, mental exercises they need to do to be able to intensify the flow of the electrical pulse in their brains. Because oftentimes I see that, most of the older generation, yes, while they are in their youth, they were very active. While they're working, they're very active. The moment they retire, everything comes to a screeching halt. All they do is sit in front of the TV and watch the TV and not exercising their brain. So, as they say, if you don't use your brains, uh, you will lose it. So, sitting down in front of the TV and vegetating is a fantastic recipe to shut down the brain. So, this is why it's very important to be active, going for a walk, playing with your pets, playing games, doing meditation, doing asanas, actively engage in social work. All these things actually prepares one to be active, and that stimulates the neural activity in the brain. So we see that particularly I have a lot of people that are much more older. They find it harder to concentrate because parts of the brain is on a mode that is, you know, stepping down mode because they haven't done much since retirement, right? So that is why always keep yourself active, even though you are retired. Get up, go for a walk, have conversations, attend satsangs, doing charitable work. All those things are very important. Small, small things make a big difference in parts of your brain. So this is what the finding shows. The study, but in a very good journal that shows that this meditational practice, and particularly you can do all the other things, but this meditational practice actually makes a significant changes in this part of the brain that actually helps people overcome all those, what they call the, affective disorders, which comes with aging, right? So this is something that one needs to look at very carefully. And the earlier you start meditation, the better. But it's never too late. Which means that if you're in a later stage of your life, you need to intensify. You need to do things, and so on. So this is something that I will cover more in detail on how do you prepare yourself for meditation so that, see, many people, particularly in a much more older age, they say, I don't have the motivation, I have difficulty concentrating, and sometimes you also see that they may be really good in the youth and, in their professional life, in the 40s, 50s, they were in control of everything. The moment they come to the 50s, 60s, 70s, they lose confidence in themselves, right? The decision making process is impacted. It's because of the physiological changes that are happening in the brain. And this is where studies have shown that meditation actually helps reverse this by regenerating parts of your brain that is starting to shut down due to aging. So it's very, very important that how meditation has an impact on multiple parts of your brain. And this one part is a very important part. This is an important junction point where the information is carried through throughout and transmitted to different parts of the head and the brain and the spinal cord and all the sensory organs. The next one is actually the bottom part of the brain, and you'll see this also in Mahan's book. He talks about the medulla oblongata, which is actually the place where, this is the part where I'm going to go a little bit more in more detail, why when we practice meditation properly, our heart rate, slows down, our respiratory system, our breathing improves, right? And our blood pressure, becomes more and more optimal. So we see that this part of the brain, which is what they call the medulla oblongata, is actually the place where the cardiovascular and the respiratory system, that means your heart and your breathing system, are connected, right? And so this network is so important to manage the heart rate, the breathing rate, and the blood pressure. They're all interlinked, right? If there are problems with this part of the brain, we see that it disrupts your heart rate, your breathing changes, your blood pressure shoots up. So practicing meditation helps one to have a much more healthier heart. Your breathing is more synchronized and your blood pressure is much more normal, right? This part of the brain also controls a lot of the automatic processes, things that we have no control over. It happens naturally, like coughing and sneezing and swallowing, and maintaining our own balance, right? So again, we see that as we age, um, our heart rate changes, breathing pattern changes, our blood pressure changes, and if we maintain a good, healthy lifestyle of meditation, mindfulness, exercise, we see that we're able to have a very healthy heart. Breathing is really good. Our whole blood system is flushed with oxygen, and our blood pressure becomes more and more normal. And if you have very high blood pressure, you tend to have enlarged heart, which is not very good. And ultimately, one finally, the heart just stops. So again, it is very important that, as it's said, that if this part of the brain is damaged, it has respiratory failures, paralysis, signals are not being passed through, and you start losing sensation of parts of your body because electrical pulse are not getting through, and the whole body is connected by that circuit system. Somewhat like short circuiting happening, right? So how is meditation very important? See, when we practice meditation, the flow of the electrical pulse, the bioelectromagnetic field, is much more intensive and much more forceful. And as that happens, you see that with it carries that flow of blood, and that nutrients and any blockage is addressed much more easier, right? And you see that the cellular growth, the neural transmitters all becomes more stronger, and you see that it helps resolve any constriction or any damage to these parts of the brain. So basically, what you see is that meditation is so important to have major impact on 11 parts of your brain for the brain to function efficiently so that it is able to transmit the relevant electrical pulse and information not only to other parts of the brain to operate optimally, but also send that vital signals to key parts of our body like heart, respiratory system, endocrinal system, all our sensory organs. All that becomes much more efficient, much more optimal, and this slows down the aging process of the brain and also parts of our body, which, as we age, things slowly slows down. That's the nature of our body. But it slows down that aging process. And you see that you can live life in a much more optimal, much more, graceful way. And all this is very important because the brain is the seat of consciousness. The brain is the hardware for the mind. The brain is not healthy, the mind finds it hard to generate positive, inspirational thoughts, enjoy the experiences of life, learn to overcome challenges, transform scars into star, you know, able to find solutions, make good decisions. All these things are adversely impacted if the health of the brain is not so great. Meditation is the exercise that helps the brain to be healthy. If the brain is healthy, the mind is healthy. If the mind is healthy, our intellect becomes sharp and deep. If our intellect becomes sharp and deep, it has now the bandwidth to explore this thing called life, including understanding purpose of life, the creation, and the creator itself. But if the brain is not healthy, the mind is unable to do all those things, and you see that life can be challenging, far less ability to discover anything. So from my own experience of the last 40 over years of practicing meditation, it has been really an awesome experience, right? It really helps you to achieve many things in your life. Yes, does the body get sick? Yes, the body will get sick, but the recovery rate is better. Yes, there are things that you forget, but you see that you're able to recollect things better. So you're able to recalibrate and you're able to bounce back much more faster. So the agility of your brain becomes much more better. That gives that mind a little bit more freedom to explore, deepen, and enjoy this experience called life. Otherwise, you see that as we age, it changes our personality, and sometimes, you observe your own personality and you may not like it, right? And those who meditate, they really, really enjoy life, and they really love what they are experiencing. And you see that they acquire a quality called a winsome personality, a personality that is pleasant, personality that is inspirational, a personality that have the can-do attitude, and a personality that does not worry about anything. You say, yes, I have that divinity in me to overcome every challenge. And that is what positive living, and that is what the power of meditation is, to create a very powerful brain as we age. But with that comes a powerful mind, a sharp intellect that helps us to explore this thing called life, right? And we become explorers. Now, I've touched this one by one part. In the next satsang, I will put them all together. If you practice meditation and all 11 parts of your brain is firing away, what would that experience be, right? And you'll see that as you start practicing meditation, you'll get glimpses of this, and you see that even though there are days that you may not get it, it's okay, you know, let me try a different way. Let me be more creative. Maybe sitting down and meditating, usual way, don't get it. But let me sit in the garden and observe the trees very, very carefully. It's swaying, and the swaying of the trees help you to focus, and that gives you the vibration. The same thing, there are times that you observe small things in life and you see that that helps you to focus and gives you that kind of connected to that vibration that is permeating throughout the universe, in the plants, in nature, in the winds that is passing by, in the small creatures that are crawling, from the ants right up to, you see that connected state. So it's not just sitting down and meditating, but you experience that connected state in many facets of your life that is around you and within you. And that's what, at least I learned that there are days that the normal meditation doesn't give you that connectedness, because nature within you is saying that explore me elsewhere. And when you do that, you feel that vibration from the things around you. So this is what, at least the meditation that I have learned from my guru, that you feel that vibration not only within you, but around you and around nature. And that's what the connected state is. I'll go a little bit more in detail in the next class when all of them come together, and then show how Mahan's meditation method, particularly the three stages, help fire up parts of the brain that gives us that particular experiences that Mahan and other great saints and great scholars have achieved. Sandosha.